Zion National Park is known for its towering red cliffs, breathtaking canyons, and serene beauty, but behind the postcard-perfect scenery lies a much darker reality. From sudden disappearances to deadly falls and strange circumstances that still puzzle investigators, these are not your average outdoor accidents. In this video, we're counting down the 5 most disturbing deaths at Zion National Park. Cases that remind us of nature's beauty can be as unforgiving as it is awe-inspiring. It was Saturday, June 5th, 2021, a clear, warm morning in Zion National Park. Cassie Brown, 26 years old, laced up her boots, checked her gear, and set out alone. An experienced canyoneer and trusted guide with the Zion Adventure Company, Cassie wasn't new to the landscape. She had explored these canyons countless times, sometimes with fellow enthusiasts, other times with her mother, both drawn to the thrill and silence of Utah's sandstone labyrinth. But that morning, for reasons still unknown, she chose to go solo. No one could have imagined it would be the last time her family would see her alive. Cassie's love for canyoning wasn't just a hobby, it was a passion she lived and breathed. She was methodical, safety-conscious, and deeply respected in the community. So when she disappeared without a word, it sent ripples of dread through everyone who knew her. The canyon she chose that day wasn't known for danger. In fact, many considered it easy. But Zion has a cruel way of turning familiar ground into something unforgiving in an instant. As Cassie descended a narrow rappel, her rope, her lifeline, suddenly jammed. Tangled on a ledge, it refused to budge no matter how many times she tried to free it. Alone, suspended in a remote canyon with fading daylight, she was faced with an impossible choice: wait and hope that someone might happen upon her, or try to ascend the rope back to safety. She chose to fight. Attempting a rope ascent isn't easy, even for seasoned climbers. Every motion has to be precise, every grip flawless. But at some point during her climb, the rope gave out. Just like that. A sickening snap echoed through the canyon as Cassie plummeted 50, maybe 80 feet into the hard, unrelenting rock below. The fall shattered her body. Bones broke. Organs ruptured. But she was still alive. For a short while, she held on. An hour later, another group of canyoneers stumbled across abandoned gear. Cassie's gear. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. One of them raced back to alert Zion's search and rescue team. Crews mobilized. Hiking routes were shut down. The Narrows, Mystery, Orderville Canyon, all temporarily closed. Even shuttle stops and riverside trails were blocked as emergency responders raced against time. A helicopter circled overhead, but the canyon's steep walls and narrow passages mocked every attempt to reach her faster. When rescuers finally reached Cassie, she was lying broken and barely conscious. Medics worked quickly, desperately, fighting to keep her with them, but it was too late. Within moments of being found, Cassie's body gave out. She died there in the silence of the canyon she loved, alone, but not forgotten. Her body was recovered the next evening, and as word spread, grief followed. Friends, fellow guides, and canyoning enthusiasts poured out tributes. One called her a master of the limestone slots, a guide whose skill and spirit brought safety and awe to those who followed her lead. Another remembered how deeply she cared, how she shared her love of the outdoors with everyone she met. It was supposed to be a short, unforgettable adventure, just a few hours of exploring one of Zion National Park's most iconic and sought-after destinations, Keyhole Canyon. On Monday, September 14, 2015, 7 hikers set out with excitement and anticipation. Mark McKenzie, Linda Arthur and her husband Steve, Gary Favela, Muku Reynolds, Robin Broom, and Don Tenaire. Most of them were from California, connected through hiking clubs and a shared thirst for new challenges. Some had even taken canyoning courses to better prepare themselves. They weren't experts, but they weren't reckless either. By all accounts, this should have been a routine outing, just another hike. But Zion doesn't care how prepared you think you are. That afternoon, as the group descended deeper into Keyhole Canyon, a place known for its narrow sandstone walls and sudden drops, something shifted. Unseen and far above, the sky had begun to darken. Just 2 hours past noon, park rangers made a decision: shut down the canyons. A powerful storm had swept in faster than anyone anticipated. The monsoon season had struck again, but the hikers were already inside. And in a place like Keyhole, there is no signal, no sound of thunder until it's too late. No warning of the floodwaters racing toward you. It's believed they never even saw it coming. In a flash, cold, muddy water surged through the canyon like a freight train. One by one, they were dragged through the twisting corridors of stone, battered by the very terrain they'd come to admire. The desert, silent moments before, had turned into a death trap. No one knew what had happened. Not at first. Then, fate intervened. 3 hikers, strangers to the group, had crossed paths with them earlier that day. They shared a few words, helped take a group photo. A simple moment, a smile, a click of the camera. None of them knew it would be the last photograph those 7 hikers would ever take. Hours later, when the storm rolled in and the 3 hikers made it safely back to the base, they realized something was wrong. The group they'd met never returned. They reported what they saw to the rangers. Search teams raced to confirm the worst. They found the hikers' vehicles still parked, untouched. Time passed and no one came back for them. A full-scale rescue was impossible at first. The storm had turned the canyon into a violent torrent, far too dangerous for even the most experienced rescuers to enter, so they waited. Then, finally, the search began. Dogs trained for disaster zones combed through mud and debris. Rangers searched every twisted bend and flooded crevice, and slowly, painfully, the truth emerged. One by one, their bodies surfaced. Over the next week, the remains of each hiker were recovered from various points along the canyon. Some had been carried miles downstream. Others were wedged between rocks. All of them were gone. No one had survived. News of the tragedy broke the hearts of their families and devastated the close-knit hiking community they came from. Eventually, a memorial bench was placed at Tanga State Park, a place to sit, reflect, and remember 7 lives lost to nature's silent fury. No plaques or statues could ever explain what really happened in those final moments. The truth likely vanished with the floodwaters. But one thing remains clear. Zion is not just a place of wonder, it's a place of power. And sometimes that power takes.
One woman has died and her husband is injured after the 2 hiked overnight in the Narrows. The Zion National Park search and rescue team first responded when visitors reported an injured man and an unconscious woman.
On November 20th, 2022, a 33-year-old man and his 31-year-old wife stepped into the mouth of the Narrows, a stunning, winding slot canyon carved by the Virgin River, where towering stone walls rise like cathedral columns on either side. It's a hike that promises beauty, solitude, and a kind of quiet adventure that speaks to the soul. But on that day, the silence would take on a colder, more merciless tone. The couple had secured a permit for the full 16-mile trek. That kind of journey isn't for the faint of heart. It demands physical endurance, mental focus, and careful preparation, especially in November. The hike requires trudging through waist-deep water hour after hour with no cell signal, no shortcuts, no easy way out. But to them, it must have felt thrilling. They moved quickly, confidently. They had each other. What could go wrong? Then the sun dipped below the canyon rim. Temperatures, which had started at a brisk but manageable 49 degrees Fahrenheit, began to drop. At first, maybe it just felt like a shiver. But as darkness bled into the canyon, the air turned cruel, bitter. The rocks radiated cold instead of warmth, and the icy river, now a constant, punishing presence, was relentless. They were far from help. No phone calls, no signal, no flares. Just the sound of their own breath turning shallow and the water lapping at their boots. Their clothes, soaked from the river, gave them no defense against the dropping temperatures. Before long, the signs of hypothermia began to set in. Shivering, slurred speech, confusion. Their bodies couldn't keep up. They were freezing from the inside out. Somewhere along the trail, they made a desperate decision. Stop, set up camp, wait for morning. They were just a mile and a half from safety, just over a mile from warmth, lights, and rescue. But in the canyon, that distance might as well have been 100. The choice to stop wasn't wrong. It was human, and it was fatal. By morning, the woman had deteriorated quickly. She was worse off than her husband, slipping deeper into the grip of cold. Her skin likely pale and stiff, her breath shallow or gone. The man, barely hanging on himself, made the only choice he could. He left her. Imagine the agony, leaving the person you love most in the world behind in a freezing canyon while you stumble forward, broken, for help that may or may not come. But he pressed on. He had to, for her. Somewhere along the trail, he found strangers, hikers, humans. They took one look at him and realized something was terribly wrong. Help was called. Emergency teams rushed in. More than 20 trained rescuers pushing through the same icy water the couple had faced the night before. They found the man first. He was barely conscious but alive. Rescuers brought him to the Zion Emergency Operations Center, where medical teams fought to stabilize him. Then they found her. She was lying by the river, unmoving. A hiker tried to revive her, but it was too late. Her body was already past saving. Cold. Still. She died alone in the night, surrounded by the very beauty they had come to experience together. To this day, their names have not been released. Whether out of respect for the family's grief or their own private wishes, the world only knows them as a couple. But in those anonymous figures lies something deeply haunting, because they could have been any of us, any couple chasing a shared adventure, any two people believing that love and courage were enough. In Zion, the land does not promise mercy, only truth. And sometimes that truth is colder than we can imagine. It was August 2022, and Jatal Anahatri, just 29 years old, needed a break. Her days were filled with PhD in hydrology and atmospheric sciences at the University of Arizona. A rising researcher, brilliant and kind, Yal didn't often make time for herself. But this time, she did. The Narrows in Zion National Park called to her. She answered. She wasn't alone. Two of her close friends came along for the trip. The plan was simple. Hike, laugh, exhale, recharge before the fall semester. This was supposed to be her reset button, but the canyon had other plans. As they prepared to begin their hike, park rangers issued a warning. Flash floods were possible, the kind of sudden violent surges that can turn tranquil desert washes into death traps. Jal heard the warning. She knew the risks. Still, she went. Maybe she felt confident. Maybe she thought it would pass. Maybe she just needed to feel alive in the wild, if only for a few hours. Her friends chose to stay back. They'd meet later at the visitor center, they said. They never got that chance. At some point along the trail, the storm struck. In Zion, flash floods don't arrive like thunderclaps. They creep in, then devour everything. A wall of water, thick with debris, roared through the Narrows. The narrow stone corridor became a funnel, trapping everything in its path. Hikers, who just minutes before were walking on dry rock, were suddenly up to their waists in icy brown water, fighting for footing, then fighting to stay alive. Yal couldn't swim. She, along with several others, was swept away, helpless against the raging current. Park rangers were alerted immediately. A rescue team was mobilized. They found one injured hiker hundreds of yards downstream and rushed them to a hospital. Others had managed to scramble onto high ground, marooned but alive. They were guided to safety once the water subsided. Rescuers asked if anyone was still missing. No one spoke up. No one knew. No one realized. Not until hours later, when Yal didn't return. Her friends waited at the parking lot, watching shadows stretch long across the pavement, expecting her. Nothing came. They reported her missing. That single phone call ignited a search operation unlike anything Zion had seen that season. Over 170 emergency responders, swiftwater specialists, search dogs, drones, helicopters, and her family, devastated, hopeful, desperate, arrived to join the search. On the first day, there was only silence. On the second, that silence grew heavier. Her brother spoke to reporters, his voice shaking. He watched a piece of footage released by a local outlet. Two people clinging to broken branches being carried away by the flood. One of them looked like Yal. He couldn't be sure, but deep down, he feared he was watching his sister's final moments. The search continued. Day 3, nothing. But they didn't stop. Rescuers scoured the most treacherous parts of the Virgin River. Log jams, deep eddies, tangled roots where water could hide a body. Still nothing. And then, on the 4th day, the current gave her back. 6 miles south of the Narrows, they found her. There was no saving her. Jal was gone. A medical examiner confirmed what her family had feared, but already knew. She had died in the flood. In the very place she'd gone to find peace, she met her end. The news rippled outward, far beyond Zion. Her university mourned deeply. Professors, students, colleagues, all described her the same way. Gracious, humble, brilliant. A close friend called her the most wonderful person, someone whose kindness had no limits. On Thursday, August 25th, 2022, in a quiet room at the Metcalf Mortuary in St. George, Utah, Jal's funeral was held. Friends gathered, her family grieved, and somewhere not far from where she took her final steps, the Virgin River kept flowing, unforgiving, eternal. It's one of the most iconic hikes in Zion National Park. Since 1926, it has pulled in hundreds of thousands of hikers, each one drawn by the promise of breathtaking views and the thrill of walking a razor's edge. But make no mistake, this trail does not forgive mistakes. The path begins innocently enough. A winding climb through stunning red canyons. A test of endurance, yes, but manageable. The danger, the real danger, waits until the final half mile. That's where the earth drops away on both sides. where hikers grip onto anchored chains for dear life, carefully navigating a narrow spine of sandstone with nothing but sky and abyss flanking their every step. One slip, one moment of hesitation, and it's over. On March 3rd, 2017, Tate Ryan Valino stepped onto that trail. He was 45 years old, a husband, a father, a writer, a man who once worked in financial services but who found greater purpose in the words he penned, the books he authored, and the lives he touched through volunteer work with Habitat for Humanity. He kayaked when he could, sought peace in nature. That day, Angel's Landing was his destination. He went alone. Perhaps it was the solitude he sought, time to reflect, to challenge himself, to be suspended between earth and sky with only his thoughts for company. No one knows exactly what drew him there that day, but he didn't tell his story on the way back down. The trail kept that for itself. Sometime during the climb, as he ascended the final perilous stretch, something happened. No one saw the moment. No one heard a scream. But somewhere along those narrow ridges, Tate Valino fell, plummeting down the unforgiving sandstone cliffs to the rocky canyon floor below. It was hikers passing through later who spotted him, motionless, broken, sprawled out on the sun-baked stone. They called for help. Zion Park authorities responded quickly, closing off the trail, deploying search and rescue teams. But there was no rescue to be made, only recovery. Tate was gone. The investigation confirmed what everyone feared: blunt trauma injuries consistent with a fall from great height. No one could say exactly how far he fell. There were no witnesses, no final words, just the wind through the canyon and a silence that swallowed the story whole. His death was the 15th on Angel's Landing, the first of that year. It was ruled a tragic accident, but Tate Valino was more than just a statistic. He wrote books with titles like The Front Nine and Pull the Pin, weaving humor and heart into stories that reflected his love for life. He gave his time freely, helping to build homes and communities. He laughed. He loved. He left behind a wife and 2 sons, names kept from the public, perhaps to shield them from a world too quick to consume pain. Somewhere along that narrow, exposed ridge, Tate took his final step. And though the trail reopened that same day, though other hikers came and went, posing for pictures at the summit, the air felt different. Because Angel's Landing demands something from everyone who climbs it. Sometimes the price is higher than anyone expects, and sometimes it's everything.